This is Jessica Mullenix presenting for HRX TV here at HRX 2025. I'm excited today to be joined by Dr. Janice Chyou and Miss Mellanie True Hills. Today we'll be talking about the Heart Rhythm Society's Emerging Leaders Persistent Atrial Fibrillation think tank that has brought together a multidisciplinary group and just presented or published the call to action for persistent atrial fibrillation. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. The discussion began, I believe, a couple of years ago at an HRX, and so it kind of speaks the fact that we're presenting today. Could you guys share a little bit with me today about how the group came together for this topic that is so meaningful, persistent atrial fibrillation?
Sure. I will get us started. This is absolutely timely that our manuscript has just been published yesterday on September 3rd, and today on September 4th, we launched HRX 2025. So by way of background, HRX convened this Emerging Leaders think tank to address persistent atrial fibrillation 3 years ago at the inaugural HRX. When the group came together, this is a group of clinicians as well as other stakeholders thinking about the issues of atrial fibrillation and specifically targeting persistent atrial fibrillation. As a think tank progressed, many of the key ideas emerged, and immediately one of the most important things that emerged was patient partnership and collaboration with patient. And this is where Mellanie and Trudy Loban, another one of our patient collaborators, came in, and Mellanie and Trudy have been with us from the very start in developing this document.
That's okay. Could you speak to that, Mellanie, about how the patient advocacy voice within this group, how it really participated, and did you feel that you were well represented?
Right. I certainly felt that we were well represented because we had two of us, and normally it's just one. And so that was a great start right there. And then we were involved in the calls. We were involved with the sections in the manuscript and the discussions. And so I felt like our voices were heard. Now, it was a little bit of a challenge at first in that some of the co-authors weren't familiar with us as patients and thought of us as the usual patients rather than the voice of an entire patient community. And so we were able to bring that, and we eventually won over the fact that it was not just two of us, it was thousands of us.
That's actually interesting to bring up. You actually represented such a large population, so there's no pressure there, but I appreciate the work of the team. One of the key themes I noticed in the publication was the intersection of persistent atrial fibrillation management with emerging digital health tools. What were some of the most significant challenges you identified with integrating these technologies into clinical practice?
Thank you, Jessica. That's such a great question. As we know, there are many emerging digital health tools, and I think here, being in the middle of HRX 2025, we are being reminded of how exciting this field is and how fast it is evolving. I think some of the challenges that we identify, we end up distilling these into the ABCDEs of Tequity. So let me speak a little bit about that. So essentially, we identified that there are many different digital health challenges. They are playing into access and implementation issues, where A stands for affordability, access, applicability, and adaptability. B stands for building infrastructures, and this involves issues such as interoperability, such as infrastructures that are able to handle the data deluge that frequently come with digital health implementation. C for collaboration with multi-stakeholders, and this we can talk a little bit more about, and that's definitely a key theme here. D for digital health literacy, and E for ethical use and privacy policy. So these were the many different aspects that we thought were challenging and continue to be important as we frame the development of digital health tools to support atrial fibrillation care.
Excellent. Mellanie, I wanted to build on that Tequity term, tongue twister. As a patient and realizing that, consumers are becoming more tech savvy, how do you feel as a patient advocate that we're doing in that realm of Tequity, and did you identify anything that we could be doing better?
So first of all, there was always the concern. We hear it all the time when it comes to seniors, since most AFib patients are seniors, is that seniors are not tech savvy. Well, if they want to be, they will be. And these tools actually provide a lot of value, and so they embrace them. The biggest issue for Tequity is the affordability. So many patients are on Social Security, disability, and so affordability is a real issue. So an Apple Watch and an iPhone are not necessarily affordable, but the Android suite of products is. And so it's really not as significant an issue as most people think it is, because patients have options and they can find a way to use it. One of the bigger challenges is often having their doctors embrace their use of it. And some are very accepting and encouraging of it, and others are not.
That's understandable. I think that's an important conversation we have to have, the role of education and how we are patient education and provider education and how we use these tools. Could you speak somewhat to the lifestyle and modifiable risk factors that were discussed in the paper regarding persistent atrial fibrillation, and what were the key highlights that the think tank had?
Yeah, very much so. Thank you for that question. I think as we know from the recent AFib guideline, both sides of the Atlantic, in fact, both the American side as well as the European side, we see that lifestyle risk factor modification is becoming front and center as part of an integral part of atrial fibrillation care. Specifically related to that, on the American side, we use head to toe acronym, and that's again echoed in this document, including addressing hypertension, addressing heart failure, addressing reduction and minimization of alcohol use, addressing comorbidity of diabetes, smoking cessation, thinking about identifying patient with sleep apnea, thinking about obesity, thinking about physical inactivity. These are all key risks, the risk factor modification and lifestyle management. They're integral to atrial fibrillation care. In our review, that there are also many areas where data need to be further developed to be specific for persistent atrial fibrillation patients. And this is an area that we will call to action for the clinical research community to continue to work on.
Right. So both of you have a question. We've talked about the collaboration and the different parts of the team that came together, but could you speak a little more to how the stakeholders, was there any discussion about how do we pursue that relationships going forward? There's more than just the clinician, more than just the patient. Speak a little bit to the other members of the team and any highlights that you maybe wouldn't be so apparent.
Yeah. Do you want to start with Dr. Chyou?
Sure. Thank you, Mellanie. I think certainly patient-centeredness and involvement of patient up front remains a key part of the collaboration. I think evident from the HRX session, which I actually think is a prime example of a successful way for a multi-stakeholder gathering. The other stakeholders that are key in this process include the insurance, the payers, to allow for reimbursable coverage of several of these risk factor modification interventions to proceed in a feasible manner. Also requires industry partner, many of who are here, and we had the pleasure of speaking with during HRX, to think about innovation that can address some of these issues. Also certainly includes policymaker, regulatory agencies such as the FDA. Many of these parties all need to come together. So I think a forum such as HRX and extensions of this would be a great idea to continue to help shepherd the multi-stakeholder collaboration.
Yeah. So from a patient perspective, I think it's important that we continue to educate patients, and that really helps to foster collaboration. So just in one example, we have our annual 3-day AFib patient conference. We just finished it, and it brings together faculty who are EPs and cardiologists and surgeons, as well as regulators. Industry is there. And so that's an opportunity for us to educate each other and to foster collaboration across the space that helps get patients better educated. It also gets clinicians and industry and regulators better educated about what AFib patients are going through. So those kinds of collaborations, I think, are really important for fostering collaboration going forward.
Absolutely. So speaking to that going forward, what are your hopes for how the article is going to be perceived? Because it's published now, and where do you see the future of this leading us? This call to action.
Yeah, I think this is very exciting. I think one of the key message for us is the call to action in recognizing atrial fibrillation early, and this extensive persistent atrial fibrillation, which I think in the past sometimes people would just let persist, so to speak. And what we recognize from clinical studies that early intervention, early rhythm control in the transition part of to persistent atrial fibrillation before becoming long-lasting can increase the favorable outcome of restoration of sinus rhythm in these patients, potentially with disease progression, delaying progressions, and along with implementation of lifestyle risk factor modification can go a long way. Our hope is that through this document that we also raise awareness in terms of thinking about close collaboration with partner and other stakeholders in education, in providing resources and prompt referral so that we can all come together and continue to move the healthcare forward for patients with atrial fibrillation, which is quite a journey.
Yeah. And my hope is really more of a blue sky kind of thing. One of the challenges we have is that many AFib patients are being treated by generalists or even general cardiologists, and they're not getting to the specialist in time, and so they're stuck in persistent AFib. And my hope is that we can raise awareness, get patients to specialists much sooner, get them treated sooner, and that persistent may become diminished or even a thing of the past.
That's an excellent point. I think it brings it full circle, talking about equity, getting patients access to care, and then also collaborating with the team. I really appreciate you guys' time today, joining us at HRX. I hope you guys all check out the article. This has been Jessica talking to you from HRS Studio at HRX 2025.